Welcome to the webinar today. We are really excited about the topic we're going to talk to you today about. When we deal with ministries and organizations, maybe mid to small size churches, maybe you don't have a large staff to handle some of the things that we're going to be talking about, not only in this, but in the webinar series that we're doing. So there's a lot of great topics that we're going to bring about today. At the end of the webinar today, we'll also tell you we're going to give away a free thing or two for you. So feel free to hang out and hang out with us. We're going to try to give you a lot of value, but there's nothing here to sell per se. We're just wanting to give you the value. And obviously, you're going to hear from three of us today that are in the field that are glad to serve and work with you in any way possible. I'm Dr. Rodney Agan. I'm the CEO and the founder of Simple Ministry. And we'll talk more about that toward the end. But our goal really is to serve you and serve your churches in any way that we can. So I'm glad to have as one of the partners in this webinar series that we're currently doing, Michael Campbell. He's the president of Ministries Sure, and then Jay Lowrance with MedTech. So I want them to take just a moment and at least introduce themselves, and then we'll jump into the topic. So Michael, why don't you go first, and then Jay, jump right in after him.
Thank you, Rodney. Yeah, my name is Michael Campbell, and we work. Our agency is Ministry Sure, and our focus is serving ministries, risk management solutions, and insurance placement. And we're just excited to chat about the things that we feel churches need to know.
Great.
And I'm Jay Lowrance with MedTech Consulting. And we are a technology consulting company that really helps organizations with IT, with telephone systems, with marketing and web. So we just work with all kinds of organizations, kind of helping them think through strategies and then implement those strategies to help them run more efficiently and to stay safe in today's environment.
Great. Well, Jay and Michael are longtime friends, and I trust them. They're both not only serving in the areas of for churches and ministries, and also some corporate, those kinds of things, but they're both great believers, and they just, well, I don't know about Michael, but Jay's an all-around good guy. So we're just glad to have them, and I'm honored to have you guys on today. So let's just jump right into the topic. And for those of you that are here today, this is a topic that's kind of new for churches. I mean, in the last 5 or 10 years, at least 10 years ago, probably a church or a pastor would have never even thought about the topic that we're going to talk about today. But it has quickly moved from maybe being number 28 on your top 100 problems 10 years ago to becoming number one to the top five at least. And so I'm really excited about that. So we're going to really give you some simple solutions based around cybersecurity and how to develop a strategy for your church, your organization, that kind of thing. So, Jay, why don't we just jump right in? Let's just say that I'm a pastor of a church or a leader of a nonprofit, whatever, and I don't have a lot of budget, don't have a lot of staff, but let's get to that in a few minutes. But what are some of the really key things that I need to think about in cybersecurity?
Yeah, so I think the thing I want to kind of talk to first is this point that you brought up about how it may be real low on the list of things that we think about as a church or a ministry, nonprofit, really any organization. But I would say that people who perform these kind of attacks, cyber criminals, they know that too. So they know that it's not on your radar. And we're seeing a lot more of churches and ministries that are becoming targeted because they have sensitive financial data, basic information on people like address and phone number. So that has value in a world where people are increasingly looking for data and ways to exploit that. So I think we're seeing a rise in these things because criminals know that people aren't thinking about it and aren't actively taking some steps to protect their organizations and the donors and volunteers and staff that work with them. So I think that was a great point that you brought up, that it does need to have an increased awareness in our organizations, thinking about cybersecurity and how we can protect the things we've been trusted with. And I think there's some really easy and simple and cost-effective strategies we can put in place. We don't need to spend a ton of money. Really, it may be about training. It may be about just bringing it to the front of people's minds and having an awareness about it, so that they can be looking out for things. So I think that's the biggest thing I want to highlight first is you're a target, and what are some things we can do to make sure that we're taking care of the data and the resources we've been trusted with. So to me, that's a big thing. Just making
Jay,
sure that we're aware of it.
Jay, I want to ask you because, oftentimes when you're not aware of how much of an impact something can cause, it's hard to prioritize.
Right.
In a small church, large church, whatever, it's hard to prioritize what to do first, second, and third. So could you talk about maybe some of the ways that if a church did experience a data breach, how it could potentially hurt the church?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that we have seen when we have someone that experiences a breach is there's a lot of guilt, a lot of how did I not see this? How did I fall for this? It's often just a simple thing that we do that we weren't supposed to, or something that we didn't do that we should have, that causes the issue. So a lot of times there's a just a reaction of kind of a like I blew it, and it's if that has happened to someone, I would tell them it's okay. There's much larger organizations that this happens to all the time, and um, it's not something you feel bad. You feel like you've let people down. You feel like you've lost trust in some ways. But I think it's just bringing that awareness of, hey, this happens to a lot of people. It happened to you. Let's learn from it. Let's do something about it.
Give a few quick or one or two examples of how this happens.
Yeah. So the biggest thing that we see is something called phishing, and it's where someone pretends to be somebody that they're not to try and get some information from you, either a login or, hey, can you reset this password? Or, hey, you never sent me that check. So a couple of examples. I've got a client that we worked with where someone was able to take their email signature and create a new domain, and they just added an S to the end of it. And then they sent out emails to clients pretending to be this person. And the client actually sent a very large check. Um, and they shouldn't have. And it was just something as simple as uh, that little S on the end of the domain where someone pretended to be somebody they weren't. And it looked legitimate, and they said all the right things, and they were able to get a large sum of money from someone. Another one that we experienced was where someone created a fake email. It was a church. It was a public uh, person. It was a larger church. They created a fake email that was very similar to this person's email address, and then sent out some requests for, hey, we want to surprise people in the church. Don't say anything. Let's get some gift cards and help some people out. And can you grab these gift cards and get them to me? So it was if you weren't paying attention, if you didn't know the pastor and that he probably wouldn't do this and ask this way, then you might fall for it. And what that also led to was where someone in the church received communication from this person and was able to get into some of their systems by asking for, hey, can you reset my password? I've lost it. I can't get in. And they reset the password without thinking about it. And then the person was able to get in and get they didn't get credit card information or financial data, but they got names and addresses and emails and phone numbers, which then they continued to use to try and get more gift cards and perpetuated that scam. So those are just a couple of examples of a way that a cyber criminal would pretend to be somebody they're not and try and get access to a system or try and get money out of somebody.
I think you
So,
hit a really good a point too there that everyone needs to be aware of. Generally, they'll take the email or the domain, and it's the exact domain you think, except
Right.
they change one letter or one little piece of it, or add a dot and a letter or something. So if you're ever wondering, that to me would be a great place to start, I would assume. Look at that and see.
Right.
And then I guess the other thing I would say is I probably am not about to get $10 million from my second cousin in a third world country. So
Yeah.
it's probably a good indicator.
Yeah. It's funny though, because we keep seeing those because they work. People aren't going to keep doing something if it doesn't work. So people still fall for those, unfortunately. So
Jay, I can't remember if we've talked about this particular incident, but I was kind of curious, was it an Apple gift card?
it was something similar. It was, hey, go to Walgreens or a CVS or some big store and get a gift card that has a code on the back, and then send me that code. It wasn't meet me and give them to me. It was go grab this gift card and send me the code on the back, and we're going to put it all together and give it to this person or this group of people. So that's typically how they will work. It's never to meet in person. It's always to get that card and then send them the code.
Got it.
Yeah,
I am kind of wondering too, because we kind of talked a little, you mentioned there being a breach of a certain amount of data, names, addresses, and things like that. One
right.
of the ways that we've seen, a data breach affect the church is of course trust. You mentioned that earlier.
Sure.
But the thing on my mind too is what about compliance? Because I do know that there's some measure of compliance tied to, notifying um, entities, notifying the people that potentially could be affected, um, that a breach occurred and their data may be out there. Could you
Right.
talk a little bit about that and how that might impact the church?
Yeah, I think that really goes back to the trust issue. Um, I think when we learn of something that has happened, it's it's very important to say something about it, but we also have to say it in the right way. There are some potential legal ramifications of how you notify and how you let people know, and you really need to have someone that you can talk to in an event of a data breach or a cybersecurity incident. So um, I think especially the trust part, people want to know when there's a problem, and we need to let them know we owe that to them. That hey, we've we've seen this happen. Here's what we know right now. Here are the steps we're taking to take care of this. Um, but doing that in the right way that doesn't potentially expose your organization to some other problems down the road is really important. So having either a relationship with an IT consultant or with a cyber insurance provider that you can reach out to in an instance like that, I think is very important.
Mhm.
So that kind of leads into that, Michael. I'm assuming, uh, you being from the insurance background and those kind of things, this is part of things that we can put in our policies.
Yeah, for sure. And when we look at placing a product, matching up both the limits and protections in the policy to what's actually going on at the church, their operations, in addition, potentially their exposure. There's a lot of different types of calculators tied to the number of people that you serve and the extent of the data that you're collecting on behalf of that organization, um, from a functionality standpoint. So if you have a big staff, you're going to be collecting more detailed information of that staff, 500, 1,000, 300, whatever. Um, the extent of damage and the compliance tied to a breach of that level is more significant and severe and requires more protection. That's part of working with an IT professional and insurance agent to determine your exposure, and then try to find a carrier that matches up and is willing to provide the limits needed. Interestingly enough, and Jay and I had kind of gone back and forth on this, but um, we have ministries that are, have exposure outside the US. And so with most policies, they're always going to defer to whatever the local law is in that country. So that creates another wrinkle as well. So you have to kind of think about it from a lot of different perspectives and get multiple parties involved, and perhaps even the local missionary or whatever that might have church, access to church data and could get breached, overseas and compromise, the reputation and the data held by the church as well. But I wanted to redirect a little bit and ask you, Jay, kind of going back to, you know, as a small church, most small churches have very limited budgets. And so if I'm sitting on a church board and I say, Jay, I've got a staff of 3 or 4, we don't have a data management strategy in place. We really don't, we haven't even gone down that road at all. And we feel this is incredibly important. We have $2,500 to get this ball going, to kind of get started on protecting our data. Jay, as an expert in the space, how would you recommend that our leadership spend this money, this budgeted money, to protect, the information that we need to operate as a church?
Yeah, that's a great question, Michael. I think I like to think of this in 3 different ways. I think the first thing that we need to kind of look at it is really has to do with education and training. I think that's the most important part of developing a good strategy, especially with a limited budget. I feel like in that situation, the biggest expense is probably going to be a policy of some sort to cover you if something happens. And there's a lot of great free or low cost tools and strategies that a smaller church organization can use to really protect themselves. So the first I would say is education and training, really just bringing in awareness of this issue to your staff and your volunteers. And often they're kind of that first line of defense in an organization where they are the ones who might get that email or might see, hey, something doesn't look right. What's this pop up? What is this going on my computer? So I think educating and training your staff on how to look for a phishing email, mm-hmm. or how to, what is considered a strong password. Sally123 is not a great password. That's probably easily guessable. So what does a strong password look like? And how do we keep track of those without having them written down on a tablet next to the computer? So I think training, educating our staff, and really it's really usually 4 or 5 things that we see that cause an issue. So making sure that people are aware of those things, making sure that they're able to recognize a threat is kind of the first step. And that's something that, there's lots of resources online. There's YouTube training videos. There's things that are in place that if you look, there's a lot of ways you can just find that training and implement that as part of your staff meetings or, and I say education, regular education. Mm-hmm. Doing it once and checking the box is not educating your staff. It needs to be an ongoing conversation that we make part of at least a yearly conversation, especially maybe as school's starting, we have volunteers that come in and off during different seasons. It needs to be an ongoing, regular training and education thing. So that would be the most important thing to me. The next part would be, we have data stored either on a server or in like Google Drive or Dropbox or something like that. How are we protecting that? And do we have the right things in place to make sure that that's managed well? Those mm-hmm. tools are free or generally very low cost, and they're safe, they're encrypted. Oftentimes they will meet the strongest requirements, like maybe it's medical data. So a HIPAA thing in place to where that data is secure. So Google does offer that. Dropbox offers that. OneDrive on your Microsoft account does offer those types of encryption tools to make it very safe. So how is our data stored? Is it in the cloud? Is it encrypted? So that's kind of the next layer, making sure that we're taking care of the data that we've been trusted with. And then the next thing is going to be more like a hardware firewall, that kind of stuff. Is our IT infrastructure up to the task of making sure that there can't be a data breach just from someone hacking into our system? Most just basic routers that you get from your internet provider will have a firewall of some sort, but they're not going to be real strong. So having some piece of equipment or some hardware infrastructure in place that protects your computers and your network internally is also an important thing. That gets into a little bit of cost either to set it up or to maintain it over time. But that's kind of that next step. So we've got education and training. We've got the data management. How are we handling that? And then is our network secure and being looked at? So that, to me, those are the three things that you can do before we then look at having a policy in place when something does happen. Not if, but when something does happen to kind of handle that. So
Yeah, and I was going to say here too, Jay, speaking directly to a pastor or someone like that that's helping in running a church. Oftentimes we go, "Oh, we have this guy in our church, and he knows how to program. I think he's an IT
yeah,
guy, and I'll have him." And I'm not saying
yeah,
that they are not knowledgeable in that area, but let me give a couple of quick observations about that. Number one,
Mhm.
you don't know. Are they really an expert in this area? That's
Right.
why I wanted Jay on here today because you're an expert in this area. The second thing is you're allowing someone in the church to kind of become the uh, keeper of the gate, I guess you would say. And we just don't know. You don't know what happens if they leave, what happens if whatever. So to me, having a better outside system set up because of the sensitivity of this subject is really
Right.
crucial. And that's where having, I'm sure, and we'll talk about as we close how you can get a hold of Jay, and he's more than happy to help, I'm sure. And then Michael to give a lot of input into this. But I would just say be careful about every expert in your church. And yeah, there's a lot of great stuff on YouTube and everywhere else, but also be careful about those things as well. Would that be a fair observation?
I think so for sure. I think even if you have, where I went to church for a while, I volunteered doing some things, but I didn't want to work and attend church at all in the same place, right? So I tried to volunteer in a place that wasn't related to, the IT world. So I think it's fine if some people help out, but having someone that is an expert at least overseeing. And again, I totally get that some of this is driven by budget, and it's just not possible to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars a month on an IT team. But maybe you have somebody that comes in, hey, here's what we've set up. Can you look over our shoulder and
Hmm.
just make sure we're doing this right and tell us where we need to fill in some holes? I think that, paying somebody for an hour or two of their time to come look at that makes
Yeah.
sense if you don't have a big budget. But I think that point you bring up about you're not sure if this person is an expert or not. You're not an expert, so you don't know if they're an expert or not. So having an outside source, I think, is a really good point.
Well,
Yeah, continuity. Having
there
that.
may be a seminary that does this. I don't know, but I don't know of a seminary that trains pastors on cybersecurity. You know, I know, of course, I'm dating myself, but there was no such thing as
Yeah,
cybersecurity when I went to seminary. So,
yeah,
this is a new thing, and I
right.
wouldn't. There's a lot of things that you may try to invent and create or fix yourself, but I would just highly suggest in this. Jay said it. Even if you have to pay someone just for a few hours of their time to help you get it started, wow,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
pennies compared to the potential risk on the other side. Or a
Right.
policy like Michael would do. It's that's pennies compared to the problem you would have.
Yeah, and even in just to be, it's kind of interesting with some of these policies too. It's also another third party source checking your systems to make sure they're healthy.
Yeah.
As Jane and I have worked with a number of ministries, we get alerts. The insurance carriers are also using different forms of underwriting to make sure that the church's systems are safe and secure. So they're pinging the system and offering just another perspective, another outside perspective on what could and might and should be done to mitigate that, and that's built in to the cost of the policy. So um, that's another nice, check of the system to make sure we're operating in the best capacity we can be as far as data management.
So Jay, if I'm now curious about what are my next steps as a church or pastor, obviously I could contact you, contact someone else, I guess, for that matter.
Sure. Yeah.
What would be some things that I should start working on to kind of get prepared that you would be asking me questions about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the biggest thing that we would want whenever we, start working with someone on this, the first thing we're going to do is take a look at their building. What equipment do they have in there? How many computers? Do they have a firewall? What's their network look like? Is there a Wi-Fi system? Is it exposed to the public? Does everybody know the password? Those are some of the initial things we would do. We'd also look at, how's your data being stored? Are you using um, a server? Are you using a cloud-based like a Google Drive or a Dropbox or something like that? Um, and then it kind of gets into the weeds of, are you looking at a policy? Do you have, oftentimes we'll get called in because someone has started the process of applying for a cybersecurity policy and they're like, oh, we don't meet all of these needs. So then we might look at some of the specifics that that policy might require and help them develop a plan to address those things. But if somebody wants to start this journey, kind of taking an inventory of all of the systems that you have in place, how is your data being stored and managed, who has access to all of these things, little things like when was the last time the password was changed, or when was the last time someone did updates on the computer. Those are things we could look at, but having some of those questions ready to be answered would be a great start. And then a lot of times we'll get called in after an event. They didn't have something in place and something has happened. We might ask about, the details of that. How did it happen? What's been done? So those are just kind of some starting points if someone wants to start down this journey.
So Michael, obviously Ministry sure has been in this space for a long time and has a lot of knowledge and partnerships with people that do. So talk about it from your side. I'm a church organization, and I'm realizing I have a need to get a policy or something with this. What are some things you're going to look at or ask about?
Well, our hope is that they're working with an IT professional like Jay, because the carriers are getting smarter and smarter about the questions to ask, the areas that churches need to work to improve. And so, and frankly, of most of the stuff, the information on these forms to apply for coverage are or have a tendency to need to be translated by the IT professional to the pastor or administrator that's doing that. So, that would be the first thing that we'd be looking for is, hey, do you have a partnership with an IT professional that can assist you and work alongside you through these applications? And then we try to build value in that, you do have more accountability. Where there is light, there is truth. And so, we want to shine a light in the areas that are exposed and try to work towards having a plan, an actionable plan to put some defenses up and protect the data that we have. So for us, it's working jointly with someone like Jay to walk alongside the church and say, this is the things we can implement, and then identify the things we can't. And then from there, that determines which carrier partnership makes the most sense.
Yeah, if I hear it right, and Jay, feel free to correct me or add to this, but we really need to look at, I'm looking at it from two different sides. A, your hardware, your passwords, your firewalls, all that. And then B would just simply be knowledge, like don't click this, don't do this. Because
Right.
you may be on your cell phone somewhere else. You're not even at the church at the firewall, but you still click something. We even had I've got two of our employees that we received emails uh, that we do direct deposit for them, and it said, "Oh, I've changed my banking information." Da 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 da. But when I looked at it, I knew right off this person doesn't. They don't talk like that in their email when they're talking to me. That's not the way they email. So we picked up on it. Obviously, now we've been alerted. But that's simple things that we could have easily have done wrong. So I don't know if you want to speak into that, Jay. Anything else?
Yeah, just if I can just give a quick tip on things like that. If you have an issue or a question about something, whether or not it's legitimate, did it come from a legitimate source? If you, there's something called spoofing where someone can take an email address and make it look like it's from somewhere else. But if you hover, take your mouse and just kind of hover over their email address, it will have a little pop up or it will change and show the actual email address. If that doesn't match up, that's just a quick, easy way to determine, is this from the actual person that I think it is, or is it from someone else? So that's just an easy way to kind of get around those things.
Can I piggyback on that too? Because if you do have an IT professional, use them. Jay works with
I
us.
can't tell you how many times Mike has sent me an email. Is this legitimate?
I'm just like,
So, yeah,
I am
yeah,
suspicious, you know? And
yeah.
we just had a phishing request for one of our portals, and they're like, "Can we give this person access?" I got this from an IT company with a company that we work with, and the name I didn't recognize. And so, the first thing I was like, I don't know that name. And so I asked a few other people on my team, and they didn't know the name. And I replied back and said, "We don't know this person, and if you don't know that person and it looks a little funny, pay attention to those alarm bells that are going off. Don't ignore them and utilize the people that you're entrusting to manage your data. Ask them. Wise counsel goes a long ways."
It's not a church, but I do have a friend that owns a small business with about 5 employees, and she just put on Facebook just a few weeks ago, her admin assistant had gotten an email about these gift cards and had gotten all the way to CVS, was sitting in the parking lot and called her boss to say, "I don't know if my credit card, if I have that kind of limit to buy that many, can I use the company card too and then get or whatever?" Of course, the owner was like, "No, no, 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 don't do that." But I mean, she was already at CVS when it happened. So yeah. So any last bits of wisdom or ideas or thoughts, Jay, about this before we kind of conclude the webinar for today?
Yeah, if I could end with anything, I would just say we've been trusted with a lot, and I think we should be cognizant of that. Um, the work that we do in a church or a ministry nonprofit is so vital, and we want to do our best to make sure that the money and the information and the volunteer, all the people that we work with, the things we work with, the resources we have are stewarded well. So having conversations like this, I think, are very important just to highlight and bring awareness to it. And then find somebody in your area that you meet with, that you trust, that can help walk you through these things and just kind of help educate you so that you can pass that on to the people that you work with. I think it's a very important conversation. I'm super proud to be part of it.
When my grandfather and father were pastors, so we're going back many, many years, you didn't even lock the door to the church.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, who would lock a church? But then obviously today, if you're a pastor, you wouldn't take all of the sensitive information or all the things that you have. Maybe it's client, it's people you're counseling or people's personal data, they're giving data. You just don't take it out there and lay it in the middle of the auditorium and let people just walk around and pick it up. We lock it somewhere in a bill, in an office, in a file cabinet. That was what we did next. Well, now we're at the day we've got to lock everything, but it's not a physical lock necessarily on a door or whatever. It's a cybersecurity lock that we need. And so we're in a different day. It's just where it is. So if you're a pastor and you're thinking, is this really as big a deal as I think? I would probably say it's a bigger deal than you think if you're already, considering that. Michael, any last thoughts on this before we kind of wrap back up? And I want to go back around and have everybody to know how to get a hold of you. So any last thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say, to emphasize again what Jay said, we've been entrusted with our reputation matters. And at the end of the day, we want to help ministries take that responsibility very seriously and do our best to continue that trusting relationship. And in that, it does matter. Someone they do need to be able to confide in us and a ministry does need to be a trusted partner. And once that trust is burned, it makes it tough from a relationship standpoint. I think that's the biggest loss in all of this. When there is a breach of trust, a breach of data, it all kind of flows into the same sort of vein.
So, Michael, I know we have said on the previous webinar, and I'm sure on this one, you're willing to do a risk analysis on a lot of things for a church or an organization, nonprofit. If someone wants to get a hold of you and Ministry Sure, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah, so our website is ministrysure.com. My personal email is mike@ministrysure.com, and our office number 770-716-0180. I'd love to interact with you also on LinkedIn if you have a profile, and we just want to share as much as we possibly can as far as information so the ministries can make wise choices going forward.
Great. Jay, we're really thankful you came on today and bringing your expertise and that kind of thing. So, what is a good way for us to get a hold of you if someone is interested in more information?
Yeah, thanks for letting me do this. Our website is medtechconsulting.net, and my email address, jay@medtechconsulting.net. I'm happy to, if you have something you want reviewed or you just have specific questions about any of this, I love educating and helping people learn about this. So happy to interact in any way I can and help out.
And I'll just say as well a little bit about us. Simple Ministry, simpleministry.org is where we really serve churches and work with churches. We do a lot of executive coaching and a lot of ministry coaching for pastors, leaders, and that kind of thing. But then we also are really working a lot more in the areas of your digital marketing, your online presence. And so really, I would say we're helping where ministry meets technology, kind of that vein. And if you're on the webinar today and you're interested in that, go to simpleministry.org. We're going to give you a free online marketing report. We'll just look at everything that you have online, all of your presence, and just figure out some areas where maybe we can help you improve that if you're interested in that. And then I would leave with this too. If you go to simpleministry.org, look at the menu for the menu partners, and we'll be putting the logo and the connect for Ministry Sure and also for MedTech. And you're welcome to go there and click right over to their websites. And I would encourage you to do that. Well, thanks, gentlemen, for being on today, and I appreciate all of your knowledge and expertise. And if you're watching the webinar today, there'll be some other things that we'll probably have linked to. So feel free to connect with any of us in any way. We are obviously companies that work and serve you, but more than that, we are brothers. We have a servant heart, and we'll help you. So it's not about you got to pay things all the time. Sometimes it's just simply about having someone you can trust to have an ear. And so we want to be there for you. Have a great day, and thank you for being on the webinar today.
Thank you.